My name is Lucy, and I'm 27 years old. I never expected my wedding day to become a battlefield, but there I was standing in my white dress with water dripping down my face as my mother-in-law, Vivian, screamed, "You married my son for money." 300 guests fell silent watching my humiliation. In that moment, something changed inside me. Instead of crumbling, I found a strength I never knew I had, and I turned what could have been my greatest shame into my most powerful triumph. If you're watching this, drop a comment telling me where you're from, and if you've ever had to stand up to a family bully, hit that like and subscribe button. Trust me, you'll want to hear what happened when I decided I wouldn't let someone else write my story. I grew up in a small town called Oak Ridge, in the heart of the Midwest. My parents were hard-working people who never had much in terms of material wealth, but they gave me something far more valuable, a strong moral compass and the belief that education could open doors. My father worked as a mechanic at the local garage, and my mother cleaned houses for the wealthier families in our community. They struggled to make ends meet, especially after my younger brother was diagnosed with a chronic illness that required expensive treatments. Despite our financial challenges, my parents instilled in me the importance of education. "No one can take your knowledge away from you, Lucy," my mother would say as she helped me with homework after her long day of cleaning. I took those words to heart, studying diligently and earning a scholarship to the state university where I pursued my dream of becoming a teacher. College wasn't easy. I worked 2 part-time jobs while maintaining my grades to keep my scholarship. During summers, I worked 3 jobs, saving every penny I could. There were nights I cried from exhaustion, but I never considered giving up. Teaching was my calling. I wanted to make a difference in children's lives, the way several of my teachers had done for me. After graduation, I applied for teaching positions across the country. When I received an offer from Westfield Academy, an elite private school in Boston, I was ecstatic. The salary was better than I'd expected for a first-year teacher, and it came with housing assistance, a necessity in a city with Boston's cost of living. I packed my life into my second-hand Honda and drove east, ready to begin my new adventure. Westfield Academy was intimidating at first. The campus resembled a small college with manicured lawns and buildings of red brick and ivy. The children arrived in luxury vehicles driven by parents or sometimes chauffeurs. As a girl from Oak Ridge, whose idea of luxury was a meal at Olive Garden, I felt distinctly out of place. But in the classroom, those differences melted away. 5-year-olds are 5-year-olds regardless of their parents' bank accounts. They still needed guidance, encouragement, and occasionally a gentle reminder to keep their hands to themselves. I quickly fell in love with my kindergarten class and the unique personality of each child. In October, the school held its annual fall fundraiser gala. All teachers were expected to attend, mingling with parents and potential donors. I bought a simple black dress from a consignment shop and borrowed a pair of earrings from a fellow teacher. I was nervous about making small talk with Boston's elite, but reminded myself I was there as a professional representing my students and the school. That's when I met Andrew. He was standing alone near the silent auction table, looking as uncomfortable in his tuxedo as I felt in my dress. He was tall with kind eyes and a smile that appeared genuine, not practiced like many I'd seen that evening. When I approached to look at the auction items, he seemed relieved to have someone to talk to. "Not a fan of these events either?" he asked. I laughed. "Is it that obvious? You're not checking your reflection in every shiny surface or loudly announcing where you summered," he said with a wink. "It's refreshing." We introduced ourselves, and I learned he was there representing his family's foundation, which supported educational initiatives. When I told him I was a kindergarten teacher, his eyes lit up with genuine interest. He asked thoughtful questions about my teaching philosophy and listened intently to my answers. Not once did he look over my shoulder for someone more important to talk to, a rarity at such events. By the end of the evening, we'd barely moved from our spot by the auction table. Andrew asked for my number, and I hesitated only briefly before giving it to him. I had no illusions. Men like Andrew rarely dated women like me seriously, but there was something about him that seemed different from the wealthy elite I'd encountered since moving to Boston. Our first date was a walk through the Boston Public Garden, followed by coffee at a small cafe. I appreciated that he hadn't tried to impress me with an expensive restaurant. On our second date, he took me to a local bookstore, remembering I'd mentioned wanting to build my classroom library. He helped me select books for my students and insisted on paying for them as a donation to my class. It wasn't until our third date that I realized who Andrew really was. We were having dinner at a modest Italian restaurant when a waiter approached, nearly bowing, as he addressed Andrew as Mr. Harrington. After the waiter left, I raised an eyebrow. Mr. Harrington, I asked, is there something you haven't told me? Andrew looked embarrassed. I'm sorry, Lucy. I should have been more forthcoming. My family. Well, we're somewhat known in Boston. Harrington Financial Group. The name meant nothing to me, which seemed to both surprise and please him. Later that night, I googled Harrington Financial Group and nearly dropped my phone. Andrew wasn't just wealthy. He was heir to one of the largest financial empires on the East Coast. The Harringtons were Boston royalty with a fortune dating back generations. I almost didn't answer when he called the next day. What could possibly come of a relationship between a kindergarten teacher from nowhere and a man whose family had buildings named after them? But there was something about Andrew that kept me from pushing the end call button. He had never made me feel less than. He valued my work and my opinions. And when we were together, the world outside, his wealth, my lack of it, seemed to disappear. I like you for you, Lucy, he said when I voiced my concerns. Not for your bank account or your social connections, just you. And against my better judgment, I believed him. What I didn't realize was that while Andrew might see beyond social class his family, particularly his mother, most certainly did not. I met Andrew's family 3 months into our relationship. He had suggested dinner at his parents' home, assuring me that they would love me as much as he did. Those words should have been my first clue that he was nervous about the introduction. The Harrington estate was exactly what you might expect. A sprawling mansion in the most exclusive part of Beacon Hill, complete with a gated entrance and a circular driveway where a valet took Andrew's car. I smoothed down my dress, the nicest one I owned but still woefully inadequate for the occasion, and tried to calm my racing heart. Just be yourself, Andrew said, squeezing my hand. They'll see what I see in you. The door opened before we could ring the bell, revealing a stern-faced butler who greeted Andrew formally before leading us through a marble-floored foyer into a sitting room that belonged in a museum. That's where I first met Vivian Harrington. She was tall and slender, with perfectly coiffed blonde hair and the kind of face that had clearly benefited from the best cosmetic procedures money could buy. Her smile didn't reach her eyes as she ear-kissed Andrew's cheeks and then turned her gaze to me. I felt like a specimen under a microscope as she assessed everything from my shoes to my hair. So this is the teacher, she said, her tone making my profession sound like street sweeper or garbage collector. Mother, this is Lucy Palmer, Andrew said, his arm protectively around my waist. Lucy, my mother, Vivian Harrington. I extended my hand. It's lovely to meet you, Mrs. Harrington. Your home is beautiful. She took my hand briefly, her grip limp. Yes, well, we've been in this house for generations. The Harringtons have quite a history in Boston. Andrew's father, William, was polite but distant when he joined us, shaking my hand firmly and offering me a drink. He seemed more interested in discussing business with Andrew than getting to know me. The only warm welcome came from Andrew's younger sister, Sophie, who bounded into the room with an energy that seemed out of place in the formal setting. Finally, she exclaimed, hugging me as if we were old friends. I've been dying to meet the woman who's made my brother smile like an idiot for months. Dinner was an exercise in subtle humiliation. Vivian questioned me about my background, my education, my family, each inquiry designed to highlight the vast gulf between their world and mine. When I mentioned my parents' occupations, she raised a perfectly shaped eyebrow. How quaint, she said. I don't believe I've ever actually met a mechanic, except when there's a problem with one of our vehicles, of course. My father is the most honest man I know, I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. People drive from neighbouring towns to have him work on their cars because they trust him. Vivian smiled thinly. Trust is important, especially when one handles expensive automobiles. I suppose your mother's work as a housekeeper gave you an appreciation for fine things. It gave me an appreciation for hard work and dignity, I said, feeling Andrew's hand on my knee under the table, and for treating people with respect regardless of their job title. A flash of something, anger, respect, crossed Vivian's face before she turned to the butler and requested the next course. That first dinner set the pattern for my relationship with Vivian. At every family event, she found ways to emphasize my outsider status. She accidentally spilled red wine on my dress at a charity gala, immediately offering to replace it with something more suitable for these events. She regularly mentioned Andrew's ex-girlfriend Caroline, the daughter of a senator, wondering aloud whatever had happened to that lovely girl. I overheard her at a garden party speaking to her friends about Andrew's relationship with me. It's just a phase, she assured them. He's always had a charitable streak. Remember when he brought home that stray dog? This is similar, I expect. He'll tire of playing savior and find someone appropriate. Andrew defended me when he witnessed Vivian's behavior, but he always tried to keep the peace. She's from a different generation, he would say. She'll come around once she gets to know you better. I wasn't so sure. As our relationship progressed, I learnt from Sophie that Vivian herself had come from modest beginnings. She had been a receptionist at Harrington Financial when she caught William's eye, a fact she had carefully erased from her personal history. That's why she's so hard on you, Sophie explained during one of our coffee dates. She sees herself in you, and she spent decades erasing that part of herself. It's like looking in a mirror she doesn't want to face. Understanding Vivian's background didn't make her behaviour easier to bear, but it did help me see her more clearly. Her cruelty wasn't just about me, it was about her own insecurities, her fear that someone might discover she hadn't always been Vivian Harrington of Beacon Hill. For Andrew's sake, I continued to attend family functions, to smile through Vivian's barbed comments, to hold my head high when she introduced me as Andrew's friend, the schoolteacher. I loved him, and I believed that eventually his mother would have to accept that I wasn't going anywhere. What I didn't anticipate was just how far Vivian would go to prove me wrong. A year and a half after we met, Andrew proposed. It wasn't a grand, showy gesture as might be expected from someone of his wealth. Instead, it was intimate and thoughtful, perfectly aligned with what he knew about me. He arranged with my school principal to visit during a field trip to the Boston Children's Museum. As my students explored the exhibits, Andrew pulled me aside to a quiet corner where a special display had been set up, a miniature classroom with tiny desks, each holding a single letter. When put together, the letters spelled out, "Will you marry me, Miss Palmer?" Tears filled my eyes as Andrew knelt before me, holding a ring box. "Lucy, you've taught me more about love, kindness, and what really matters than anyone I've ever known. Would you do me the honor of becoming my wife?" The ring was perfect, not the ostentatious diamond I might have expected from a Harrington, but a delicate sapphire surrounded by small diamonds. "It reminded me of your eyes," Andrew said, as he slipped it on my finger. My students cheered and clapped when I said yes, making the moment even more special. It was exactly the proposal I would have chosen. Meaningful, personal, and centered around the work I loved. News of our engagement spread quickly through Boston's social circles. Andrew's father called to offer a stilted congratulations. Sophie screamed with excitement over the phone and demanded immediate brunch to discuss wedding plans. Vivian remained ominously silent for 3 days before inviting us to dinner. "I suppose congratulations are in order," she said when we arrived, her smile tight and her eyes cold. "This is certainly unexpected." "Thank you, Mother," Andrew said, his arm around my waist. "We're very happy." "Yes, well, happiness is important," Vivian replied. "So is practicality. I've taken the liberty of contacting our family attorney about a prenuptial agreement." Andrew stiffened beside me. "That won't be necessary." "Of course it is," Vivian insisted. "With your position in the company and the family holdings to consider, it would be irresponsible not to protect the Harrington assets." I placed my hand on Andrew's arm. "It's okay," I said quietly. "I have no problem signing a prenup." Vivian looked surprised, clearly having expected me to object. "Well, that's sensible of you." What I didn't say was that I would have suggested a prenuptial agreement myself if Andrew hadn't brought it up. I had no interest in his family's money. I loved him, not his bank account, and I wanted that to be clear to everyone, including Vivian. What I didn't expect was the humiliating terms Vivian had included in the document. If we divorced, I would receive nothing, not even support, regardless of the circumstances or length of our marriage. If Andrew died, I would receive a small stipend, but no actual inheritance. There were clauses about my behaviour, my career, even specifications about how any children we might have would be raised. "This isn't a prenup," Andrew said furiously after reviewing it. "It's a contract for indentured servitude. I won't allow it." The prenup battle was just the beginning of the wedding planning wars. Vivian insisted on taking charge of every detail from the venue to the menu. She scheduled planning meetings during my school hours so I couldn't attend. She ignored my parents' input completely. When my mother tentatively suggested a family tradition of the bride carrying her grandmother's handkerchief, Vivian dismissed it as quaint but not really suitable for a Harrington wedding. She criticized my choice of dress. "A bit simple, isn't it? My bridesmaids." "Surely you must know some girls from better families, and even my choice of readings for the ceremony, something more traditional would be appropriate." "Astunai, The tension reached a breaking point when I discovered Vivian had hired a private investigator to look into my background. The PI had interviewed my former colleagues, neighbours in Oak Ridge, even my college roommates. I found out when a former boyfriend called to ask why someone was asking questions about our relationship. I confronted Vivian at her home, shaking with anger and hurt. "Why would you do this? What were you hoping to find?" For once, Vivian didn't bother with pretense. "I wanted to know what you're really after." No kindergarten teacher from nowhere captures the heart of one of Boston's most eligible bachelors without an agenda. "My agenda is loving your son," I said, my voice breaking. "That's it. That's all it's ever been." "Please," Vivian scoffed. "Do you expect me to believe you're not interested in the Harrington fortune, in the social position, in the life of luxury Andrew can provide?" "I don't care about any of that," I exclaimed. "I care about Andrew, his kindness, his humor, his heart. I would love him if he lived in a one-bedroom apartment and worked at a coffee shop." "How convenient that you don't have to test that theory," Vivian replied coldly. I left her house in tears, seriously considering calling off the wedding. Not because I didn't want to marry Andrew, but because I wasn't sure I could bear Vivian as a mother-in-law for the rest of my life. When I told Andrew what had happened, something in him finally snapped. He confronted his mother that evening, making it clear that her behavior was unacceptable, and that if she couldn't treat me with respect, she would have a very limited role in our lives moving forward. It was the first time he had truly stood up to her, choosing me unequivocally over her approval. Vivian, faced with the prospect of losing her relationship with her son, reluctantly agreed to back off. She would still host the wedding as planned, a lavish affair for 300 guests at the Harrington estate, but she would defer to our wishes on the important matters. I wanted to believe her, but something in her eyes told me this wasn't over. Vivian Harrington wasn't accustomed to losing, and in her mind our marriage would be her defeat. Our wedding day dawned bright and clear, a perfect June Saturday. Despite all the drama leading up to it, I felt surprisingly calm as I prepared with my bridesmaids in one of the Harrington estate's many guest rooms. My dress was everything I had dreamed of. Simple but elegant, with delicate lace detailing and a modest train. My mother wept when she saw me in it, saying I looked like a princess. "Not a princess," I corrected her, hugging her tight. "Just a very happy teacher who found her perfect match." The ceremony was beautiful and went off without a hitch. Andrew's eyes filled with tears when he saw me walking down the aisle on my father's arm. We had written our own vows, promises of love, respect, and partnership that felt authentic to our relationship. When the minister pronounced us husband and wife, the kiss we shared felt like a triumph. We had made it despite all the obstacles. The reception was held in the Harrington's ballroom, and sprawling gardens transformed by an army of decorators into a flower-filled wonderland. 300 guests mingled, enjoying champagne and hors d'oeuvres as a string quartet played. It was far grander than anything I would have chosen, but I had to admit it was beautiful. Vivian had been surprisingly subdued during the ceremony and the beginning of the reception. She wore a pale blue dress that was elegant without being showy, and she greeted guests with practiced charm. If she was unhappy about the marriage, she was hiding it well, at least initially. After dinner, Andrew stood to give his speech. His words brought fresh tears to my eyes as he spoke about how I had changed his life, bringing authenticity and purpose to a world that had often felt superficial. Before I met Lucy, I was surrounded by people who valued what I could give them: status connections, financial opportunity. He said, his gaze finding mine. Lucy was the first person in a very long time who just wanted me, flaws and all. She teaches 5-year-olds to be kind, to share, to believe in themselves, and she taught me those same lessons all over again. I'm the luckiest man in the world, not because of my name or my bank account, but because this amazing woman chose me to be her husband. My parents spoke next, my father's voice gruff with emotion as he welcomed Andrew to our family. "We may not have much in terms of wealth or social standing," he said, "but we love fiercely and we stand by each other no matter what. I'm proud to call you my son." As the speeches continued, I noticed Vivian drinking more heavily than usual, her expression growing darker with each glass of champagne. By the time the dancing started, there was a brittle edge to her smile that made me nervous. Still, I was determined to enjoy my wedding day. Andrew and I shared our first dance to "At Last" by Etta James, and I danced with my father to "My Girl." The dance floor filled with guests from both sides, my childhood friends from Oak Ridge. Looking slightly awed by their surroundings, Andrew's college buddies loosening their ties as the night progressed, colleagues from Westfield Academy celebrating enthusiastically. During a brief lull, I spotted Vivian standing alone near the champagne fountain. Despite my misgivings, I felt I should make an effort. This was a day for new beginnings after all. "Thank you for everything, Vivian," I said as I approached her. "The wedding is beautiful. We appreciate all you did to make it special." She turned to me, and the look in her eyes made me take an involuntary step back. Gone was the cool, controlled socialite. In her place was a woman consumed by resentment and alcohol-fueled rage. "You think you've won, don't you?" She hissed, her words slightly slurred. "You think you've secured your place in this family. This isn't a competition, Vivian," I said quietly, glancing around to see if anyone was within earshot. "I love your son. That's all this is about." "Please," she spat. "I know exactly what this is about. I wasn't born yesterday. I should get back to Andrew," I said, turning to leave. I had no desire to argue with her, especially not at my wedding reception. What happened next occurred so quickly I had no time to react. Vivian grabbed a glass of water from a nearby table and threw it directly in my face. Water drenched my hair, my makeup the bodice of my wedding dress. As I stood there in shock, droplets running down my face, she raised her voice to a level that carried across the entire ballroom. "You married my son for money!" she shouted, her face contorted with rage. "You're nothing but a gold digger who trapped him!" The music screeched to a halt. 300 guests turned as one to stare at the spectacle. The bride soaking wet in her ruined makeup, facing the mother of the groom who was red-faced and swaying slightly. In that moment, time seemed to stop. I could hear my own heartbeat thundering in my ears. I saw Andrew pushing through the crowd toward us, his face a mask of fury and concern. I saw my parents halfway out of their seats, my father being restrained by my mother. I saw Sophie's hand over her mouth in horror, and William Harrington's expression of grim resignation. But most of all, I saw Vivian's triumphant smile as she witnessed my public humiliation. She thought she had won, that I would run from the room in tears, that this moment would forever taint our marriage. And something inside me simply refused to let that happen. As water dripped from my chin onto my wedding dress, I made a split-second decision that would change everything. Instead of fleeing the scene or dissolving into tears, I walked calmly to the bandstand and asked the lead singer for his microphone. My hands were shaking, but my voice was steady when I spoke. "I'd like to address something that just happened," I said, the microphone amplifying my words across the silent ballroom. All eyes were on me, some pitying, some curious, all attentive. Vivian stood frozen, clearly not expecting this response. "For those who don't know me well, my name is Lucy Palmer, now Lucy Harrington," I began. "I grew up in a small town called Oak Ridge. My father is a mechanic and my mother cleans houses for a living. They're the two hardest working people I know, and they're sitting right there." I gestured to my parents, who straightened in their seats, my father's face proud, despite his obvious anger at what had just transpired. "I put myself through college, working multiple jobs. I graduated with honours and pursued my passion for teaching. For the past 4 years, I've taught kindergarten at Westfield Academy, where I help shape young minds and hearts every day. It's not a glamorous job, but it's a meaningful one, and I love it." I took a deep breath before continuing. "When I met Andrew Harrington, I had no idea who he was. On our first date, he didn't take me to a fancy restaurant or buy me expensive gifts. We walked through the Boston Public Garden and had coffee. It wasn't until our third date that I discovered his family name, and even then, it meant nothing to me. I fell in love with Andrew for his kindness, his humour, his genuine heart, not for his bank account. I saw Andrew moving closer, his eyes never leaving mine, love and pride evident in his expression. When Andrew first gave me a gift, a bracelet for our 1-month anniversary, I returned it to him. It was beautiful but too expensive, I said. I wasn't comfortable with such lavish presents. He respected that, and from then on his gifts were thoughtful rather than costly. Books for my classroom, a scarf he saw that matched my eyes, homemade dinner when I was too tired to cook. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. I was saying things that many of these people accustomed to transactional relationships rarely heard. When the subject of a prenuptial agreement came up, I agreed immediately. I continued. I signed papers protecting the entire Harrington fortune without complaint or negotiation. I didn't hire a lawyer to review the terms. I wanted everyone to know that I wasn't after Andrew's money. Vivian's expression faltered slightly, no doubt remembering how easily I had agreed to the prenup she had intended as an obstacle. I reached for the locket around my neck, a simple silver heart that had been with me all day hidden beneath my wedding dress. I opened it to reveal a faded photograph. This was my grandmother, I said, my voice softer now. She raised my father alone after my grandfather died in an industrial accident. She worked 2 jobs to put food on the table, but she never complained. She taught me that a person's character is worth more than all the money in the world. She showed me that dignity isn't about what you own, but how you behave, especially when times are tough. I closed the locket and looked directly at Vivian for the first time since beginning my speech. Mrs. Harrington, you believe I married your son for money. The truth is, I married him despite it. I married him knowing that his wealth would complicate our lives, that it would bring scrutiny and judgment and accusations exactly like the one you just made. I married him because when I look at Andrew, I don't see a Harrington heir. I see the man I want to build a life with. The man I would choose whether he lived in a mansion or a studio apartment. I turned back to address the entire room. To everyone here tonight, thank you for celebrating with us. I hope you'll understand that what you just witnessed says nothing about my character and everything about the pain someone else is carrying. I choose love. I choose respect. I choose to focus on the beautiful life ahead with the man I adore rather than dwelling on moments of cruelty. As I finished speaking, the room erupted in applause. Guests stood clapping and cheering, not out of pity but out of genuine respect. I had taken a moment of humiliation and transformed it with dignity and grace. William Harrington approached his wife, his expression grim. He leaned close to her ear and said something I couldn't hear, then took her arm firmly. Vivian looked stunned, as if she couldn't quite process what had just happened. Without another word, William led her from the ballroom, her exit observed by hundreds of pairs of eyes. Andrew reached me as the applause continued. He took my face in his hands, unmindful of the water still dampening my skin, and kissed me with a passion that spoke volumes. I have never been prouder to be your husband, he whispered. You are the strongest, most amazing woman I've ever known. Sophie rushed over with a towel and helped me dry my face and hair as best we could. That was incredible, she said, her eyes shining with admiration. You just became my hero. As the band began to play again and guests returned to their conversations, now with much more interesting material to discuss, I realized that what had begun as my greatest humiliation had become a moment of unexpected triumph. I had found my voice, and in doing so, I had changed the narrative completely. The reception continued the mood somehow lighter and more authentic than before. It was as if Vivian's outburst and my response had punctured the bubble of pretense that often surrounds such formal occasions. People danced more freely, laughed more genuinely, and approached me throughout the evening to express their admiration. I've known the Harringtons for 30 years, one elderly woman told me, patting my hand. It's about time someone stood up to Vivian, and to do it with such class. Well, my dear, you've made quite an impression. By the time Andrew and I left for our honeymoon suite, I was exhausted but strangely exhilarated. What should have been the worst moment of my wedding day had transformed into something powerful and defining. I had shown not just Vivian, but everyone present, including myself, exactly who Lucy Harrington was going to be. The aftermath of our wedding unfolded in ways I couldn't have predicted. Andrew and I delayed our honeymoon to deal with the immediate fallout, spending our wedding night in deep conversation about our future and how to handle Vivian going forward. I'm so sorry, Andrew said repeatedly, holding me close in our hotel suite. I knew she disapproved, but I never thought she would go that far. It's not your fault, I assured him, though part of me wished he had taken a firmer stand earlier. But we need to be clear about boundaries moving forward. I won't be treated that way again. Andrew nodded, a new resolve in his eyes. She's gone too far. There have to be consequences. The next morning, Andrew called his father and informed him that until Vivian made a genuine apology, we would have no contact with her. Furthermore, Andrew would be severing financial ties with his parents, removing himself from family accounts, and establishing his own independent holdings. I have my own money, he explained to me afterward. I've been working at the firm since I was 22 and I've made good investments. We'll be more than comfortable without access to the family fortune. I was touched by his willingness to make such a dramatic break, but also worried. Andrew, I don't want to come between you and your family. You didn't, he said firmly. My mother did that all by herself. We returned from our delayed honeymoon 2 weeks later to discover that Vivian had been busy in our absence. She had been making calls to her social circle, attempting to control the narrative by painting me as an opportunist who had trapped her son and then publicly humiliated her at the wedding. She had even reached out to the board at Westfield Academy, suggesting that perhaps my dramatic personal life made me unsuitable to teach impressionable children. Fortunately, her efforts backfired spectacularly. Too many guests had witnessed what really happened, and Vivian's version of events gained little traction. The headmaster at Westfield, who had attended the wedding himself, assured me that my position was secure and that he had found Vivian's call disturbing and inappropriate. More surprising was the quiet meeting I had with William Harrington a month after the wedding. He asked to see me for coffee without Andrew or Vivian present. "I want to apologize," he said, once we were seated at a quiet corner table. "Not just for what happened at the wedding, but for my failure to intervene sooner. I saw how Vivian was treating you, and I did nothing." His candor surprised me. William had always seemed like a background figure, letting Vivian dominate the social aspects of their lives while he focused on business. "May I ask why?" I said. "Why did you let it continue?" William sighed heavily. "The easy answer is that after 40 years of marriage, it's simpler to avoid conflict. The honest answer is more complicated. Vivian wasn't always this way. When I met her, she was a bright, ambitious young woman working as a receptionist at my father's company. She came from nothing, less than nothing really, an alcoholic father, a mother who left when she was young. This confirmed what Sophie had hinted at, but hearing it from William made it more real. When we married, my family wasn't kind to her," he continued. "My mother especially made her feel like an outsider at every opportunity." Sound familiar? I nodded, the parallels obvious. Instead of standing up to it, Vivian decided to become more Harrington than the Harringtons. She reinvented herself completely, erasing all traces of her past. She became the perfect Boston socialite, more concerned with appearances and social standing than anyone born to it would ever be. "And you think that's why she reacted so strongly to me?" I asked. "Because I remind her of who she used to be." William nodded. "You're everything she worked so hard not to be. Authentic, unapologetic about your background, loved for yourself rather than your social position. And worse, you're not playing the game by her rules. You're not trying to become someone else to fit in." His insight helped me understand Vivian better, though it didn't excuse her behavior. It also made me more determined than ever not to follow her path. I would not erase my past or change who I was to please others. Meanwhile, my students and their parents rallied around me after rumors of the wedding incident spread. Several parents who had been guests sent supportive emails, and others made a point of telling me in person how much they valued me as their children's teacher. One mother, whose daughter had been in my class the previous year, stopped me after school. "My husband and I were at your wedding," she said. "What you did took incredible courage. Just know that the people who matter see you for who you really are." Her words meant more to me than she could know. In the midst of all the drama, I had worried about my professional reputation. Teaching wasn't just my job, it was my calling, my passion. The thought of losing it because of Vivian's vendetta had kept me awake at night. Despite the external support, I struggled internally with anxiety and self-doubt in the months following the wedding. The public confrontation had taken a toll on me. I began having nightmares about being humiliated in front of crowds. I would find myself overthinking every interaction at social events, wondering if people were judging me or talking about me behind my back. Andrew noticed my distress and suggested therapy. "It's not weakness to ask for help," he said gently. "What happened would shake anyone's confidence." I took his advice, finding a therapist who specialized in family trauma and relationship issues. Dr. Brennan helped me process not just the wedding incident, but the years of subtle undermining that had preceded it. She helped me recognize that my reaction, standing up for myself with dignity rather than responding with anger or tears, had been a healthy one. "You found your voice in that moment," she told me. "That's something to be proud of, not ashamed of." Through therapy, I also came to a surprising realization. Despite everything, I felt sorry for Vivian. Not in a condescending way, but genuinely. She had built her entire identity on appearances and social status, sacrificing authenticity for acceptance. It was a hollow way to live, and on some level she must know that. This realization led me to a decision that surprised even Andrew. After 6 months of no contact with Vivian, I decided to reach out to her. Not because she deserved it, but because I needed it for my own peace of mind. My letter to Vivian was carefully composed after several sessions with Dr. Brennan. I didn't want it to come across as either judgmental or submissive. I wasn't writing to attack her or to beg for acceptance. Instead, I wrote from a place of strength and compassion. "I'm writing to offer a path forward," I explained after acknowledging the pain on both sides. "Not for my sake, and not even for yours, but for the family we both care about. Andrew misses his relationship with his father. Sophie is torn between loyalty to her brother and love for her parents. This division hurts everyone, and it doesn't need to continue. I outlined my expectations clearly: respect, civility, and a genuine apology for her behaviour at the wedding. In return, I offered a fresh start, a chance to build a different kind of relationship based on mutual respect rather than power struggles. We don't need to be best friends, I wrote. We don't even need to like each other. But we do need to find a way to be family for Andrew's sake, and for any children we might have in the future. I sent the letter without telling Andrew, not wanting him to feel caught in the middle. For 6 months after that, we heard nothing from Vivian. William maintained contact with us, meeting Andrew for lunch occasionally and calling to check in. Sophie became an even more frequent presence in our lives, often joking that she had picked a side and was sticking to it. During this time, my career flourished. I was promoted to lead teacher for the kindergarten program at Westfield, with responsibility for curriculum development and mentoring new teachers. Andrew and I purchased a home, not a Beacon Hill mansion, but a comfortable brownstone in Cambridge that we chose together. Despite having access to Andrew's personal fortune, we took out a mortgage and furnished the place with a mix of new items and family pieces that held sentimental value. We were settling into our new normal when Vivian unexpectedly appeared at our door one Sunday afternoon. She looked different, older somehow, and less perfectly put together. Her hair was still styled and her clothes still expensive, but there was a vulnerability to her that I hadn't seen before. "May I come in?" she asked, her voice lacking its usual imperial tone. Andrew, who had answered the door, looked to me. I nodded, curious about what had brought her here after so many months of silence. We sat in our living room, the silence awkward and heavy, until Vivian finally spoke. "I received your letter," she said, addressing me directly. "I've read it many times over these past months." She paused, seeming to gather her courage. "I owe you an apology, a sincere one. My behaviour at your wedding was unforgivable. The things I said were cruel and untrue. I'm deeply ashamed of my actions." Her voice broke on the last word, and to my astonishment, tears filled her eyes. Vivian Harrington crying in my living room. It was something I never thought I'd see. "The truth is," she continued after composing herself, "you remind me of who I used to be, before I was Mrs. William Harrington, before I erased my past and reinvented myself as someone worthy of the Harrington name." She looked around our home, comfortable but not ostentatious, filled with books and photographs, and evidence of a life well lived rather than perfectly staged for visitors. "You've done what I never had the courage to do. You've remained true to yourself. You've made Andrew happier than I've ever seen him. And instead of celebrating that, I tried to destroy it because it threatened everything I've spent my life building." Andrew reached for my hand, squeezing it gently as his mother continued. "I don't expect forgiveness," Vivian said. "I haven't earned it. But I hope you might consider allowing me to try to make amends, to be part of your lives in whatever limited way you're comfortable with." I studied her face, looking for signs of manipulation or insincerity, but all I saw was a tired woman who had finally recognized the emptiness of the life she had constructed. "Why now?" I asked. "What's changed after all these months?" Vivian's gaze dropped to her hands. "William has filed for divorce," she said quietly. "He says he's tired of living with someone who values appearance over substance, who would hurt her own son rather than admit she might be wrong." The news shocked both Andrew and me. The Harringtons' marriage had seemed as permanent as their social position. "I'm sorry," Andrew said, and I could tell he meant it despite everything. Vivian nodded. "It was a wake-up call. I've spent 40 years becoming someone I thought the world wanted me to be, and in the process, I lost myself completely. I lost the ability to recognize what truly matters." She looked up at us. "I don't want to lose my son too." Her vulnerability was disarming. This wasn't the calculating socialite who had thrown water in my face. This was a woman facing the consequences of a lifetime of choices and finding herself alone. "I can't promise to forget what happened," I said carefully. "But I can try to forgive. We can start small, perhaps Sunday dinner once a month. We take it one step at a time, see how it goes." Relief washed over Vivian's face. "Thank you," she whispered. "That's more than I deserve." As she was leaving, she paused at the door. "Lucy, there's something else I want you to know. That speech you gave at the wedding, it was the most dignified thing I've ever witnessed. You showed more class in that moment than I have in 40 years of trying to be the perfect Harrington wife. I hated you for it at the time, but now I admire you for it." After she left, Andrew pulled me into a tight embrace. "You're extraordinary," he murmured into my hair. I don't know if I could have been so gracious. "It's not about being gracious," I explained. "It's about choosing the kind of life I want to live. Holding on to anger and resentment would only poison our happiness." The path to reconciliation with Vivian was neither quick nor smooth. There were setbacks, moments when she slipped into old patterns when I reacted with lingering distrust, but there was progress too. Each successful interaction built a foundation for the next, creating a new kind of relationship based on honesty rather than pretense. 3 months after her first visit, we shared news that changed everything. I was pregnant. Vivian's reaction surprised me. Genuine joy without the controlling behaviors I might have expected. Instead of immediately planning how to mold her future grandchild into a proper Harrington, she asked thoughtful questions about our hopes and plans. "I want to do better this time," she told me during one of our now regular coffee dates. "I want to be the kind of grandmother who supports rather than dictates, who loves unconditionally." That would be a gift to our child, I said, and meant it. By the time our daughter was born, Emma Catherine Harrington, named after both our grandmothers, Vivian had transformed in ways I never thought possible. She still dressed impeccably and maintained her social connections, but there was an authenticity to her now that hadn't existed before. She had begun speaking openly about her background, even mentoring young women from disadvantaged circumstances through a foundation she established. "You inspired this," she told me when she announced the foundation. "Your courage to remain true to yourself despite pressure to change." The greatest change, though, was in how she related to me. Gone was the criticism, the subtle undermining, the cold assessment. In its place was something approaching respect and perhaps even affection. We would never have the easy, loving relationship that I had with my own mother, but we had found a way to be family in the truest sense of the word. William and Vivian finalized their divorce, but in an unexpected twist, they began dating again a year later. This time with Vivian showing up as her authentic self rather than the persona she had created. "It's like meeting a whole new woman," William confided to Andrew, "one I think I could fall in love with all over again." As for me, the incident at our wedding became something of a legend in Boston social circles. Occasionally at events, someone would approach me to say they had heard the story, usually embellished to epic proportions. I neither confirmed nor denied the more dramatic versions, simply smiling and changing the subject. The truth of what happened that day mattered less to me than what came after. The journey of finding my voice and creating a life of authentic happiness with the man I loved. The greatest lesson I learned through it all was that real strength isn't about power or control or social position. It's about knowing who you are and standing firm in that knowledge, even when others try to make you feel small. It's about responding to cruelty with dignity rather than retaliation. And sometimes it's about offering forgiveness, not because someone deserves it, but because you deserve peace. Have you ever had to stand up to someone who misjudged or underestimated you? How did you handle it? Share your story in the comments below. I'd love to hear how you found your voice in challenging situations. If this story resonated with you, please hit the like button and subscribe to hear more stories about finding strength in unexpected moments. And if you know someone who's struggling with difficult family relationships, share this video with them as a reminder that they're not alone. Thank you for listening to my story, and remember, your worth isn't determined by others' opinions of you, but by the truth you know about yourself.